Case 1. Chloe Coplen-Anderson case. Gordon, Nebraska, a town where everyone knows your name and secrets are hard to keep. In this peaceful community, 16-year-old Chloe Coplen-Anderson led a seemingly ordinary life. A high school student with a love for art and animals, Chloe's world was about to shatter. Behind closed doors, she faced unimaginable trauma, sexual abuse, mental health struggles, and a pregnancy that no one knew about. The weight of her circumstances remained hidden until one fateful night. On November 6, 2023, Chloe gave birth alone in her bedroom. In a moment of overwhelming despair, she retrieved a kitchen knife and ended her newborn son's life. Her parents, initially unaware, discovered the aftermath. Her mother, in a tearful confession, revealed the truth. The knife was later found hidden in Chloe's closet, stained with blood, a chilling testament to the act. Authorities were alerted, and the Gordon Police Department, alongside the Nebraska State Patrol, launched an investigation. Chloe's mother identified her as the perpetrator, and the bloody knife was recovered. The community was stunned. How could this happen in their quiet town? The media descended, and the public grappled with the horror of the crime. In August 2024, Chloe pled no contest to second-degree murder. Prosecutors dropped charges of child abuse resulting in death and use of a deadly weapon. Her defense highlighted her traumatic past: sexual assault at 15, ongoing abuse, and untreated mental health issues. The courtroom was divided. Some saw her as a victim of circumstance, others a cold-blooded killer. The judge, acknowledging her time served, sentenced her to 35 to 60 years in prison. Chloe's sentence was a stark reminder of the consequences of untreated trauma. At 18, she faced decades behind bars, with the possibility of release at 51. The community was left to reconcile the girl they thought they knew with the woman who had committed an unthinkable act. Chloe's case raises profound questions. How did a young girl surrounded by family fall through the cracks? What does it say about a society that failed to protect her? The case sparked debates on mental health, child abuse, and the responsibilities of adults to intervene. It serves as a tragic reminder that silence can be deadly, and that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones we choose to ignore. Case 2. Christie Parisien and Jaslyn Smith. In the serene suburban town of Miramar, Florida, the halls of Miramar High School echoed with the typical sounds of teenage life: laughter, gossip, and the hum of everyday drama. Among the students were Christie Parisien, 20, and Jaslyn Smith, 19, both seemingly ordinary young women navigating the complexities of adolescence. Their lives, however, would soon intertwine in a way that would forever alter their futures and the community they called home. Andre Clements, 20, a classmate and former boyfriend to one of the girls, harbored deep resentment after learning that Dwight DJ Grant, 18, had become romantically involved with his ex-girlfriend. This jealousy festered, leading Clements to hatch a deadly plan. On October 17, 2021, under the guise of a casual meeting, Christie lured DJ into an empty empty stairwell at their apartment complex. There, Clements and Smith ambushed him. Surveillance footage captured the harrowing scene. DJ was restrained while Clements fatally stabbed him with a sword and knife. The trio then attempted to cover their tracks by cleaning the scene and disposing of evidence. The investigation into DJ's disappearance quickly turned into a murder inquiry. Detectives uncovered incriminating text messages between the suspects, including one from Clements stating, "Murder will definitely happen soon," and another from Christie expressing willingness to assist. Surveillance footage further corroborated the sequence of events leading to the arrest of the three teens. In August 2024, Christie and Jaslyn pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit murder. Both were sentenced to 25 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Clements, who maintained his innocence, faced trial in early 2025. The courtroom was filled with the grief of DJ's family, who expressed their profound loss and the irreplaceable void left by his death. Clements was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 40 years in prison. The sentences for all three defendants were a somber reminder of the consequences of unchecked jealousy and the fragility of young lives. DJ's tragic death prompted a wave of reflection within the Miramar community. The case highlighted the dangers of emotional turmoil and the importance of addressing conflicts constructively. It also sparked discussions about the pressures faced by teenagers and the need for better support systems. While the legal proceedings have concluded, the emotional scars remain, serving as a poignant reminder of the devastating impact of a senseless act of violence. Case 3. Sierra Halseth. In the serene suburbs of Las Vegas, Daniel Halseth, a 45-year-old father, lived a peaceful life with his 16-year-old daughter, Sierra. Their home was a place of comfort and routine, untouched by the chaos that would soon unfold. Sierra, a seemingly ordinary teenager, had a close bond with her father. However, her relationship with 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, a former boyfriend, had been a source of tension. Despite their parents' disapproval and a previous breakup, Sierra and Aaron rekindled their relationship, leading to a tragic decision. On April 9th, 2021, Daniel Halseth was brutally murdered in his own home. The crime scene was horrific. Daniel had been stabbed over 70 times, his body dismembered with a chainsaw and circular saw, and then set on fire in the garage. Sierra and Aaron fled the scene, taking Daniel's car and heading to Salt Lake City. A chilling video surfaced shortly after, showing the teens laughing and discussing the murder, with Aaron saying, "Welcome to our YouTube channel, day 3 after murdering somebody." Sierra responded, "Whoa, don't put that on camera." The investigation into Daniel's death began when his landlord discovered the burned body in the garage. Authorities quickly pieced together evidence, including surveillance footage of the teens leaving the neighborhood in Daniel's car, and receipts for items like bleach, lighter fluid, gloves, and cleaning cloths purchased before the murder. A video of Sierra and Aaron discussing the murder was also found, providing crucial evidence of their involvement. The teens were eventually apprehended in Salt Lake City and extradited back to Las Vegas. Sierra and Aaron faced multiple charges, including murder, arson, and robbery. In court, Sierra read a letter alleges sexual abuse and harassment by her father, describing him as a drug addict and a pedophile. Aaron expressed remorse, apologizing to the victim's family, and stating that Daniel didn't deserve to pass in such a horrible way. The defense argued that the murder was a result of emotional distress, while the prosecution highlighted the brutal nature of the crime and the premeditation involved. On October 20, 2022, Sierra and Aaron were each sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. The court considered their ages and the circumstances surrounding the crime in determining the sentence. The victim's family expressed their grief and the profound impact of Daniel's death on their lives. The murder of Daniel Halseth by his own daughter and her boyfriend shocked the Las Vegas community and raised questions about parental control, teenage relationships, and the signs of potential violence. The case highlighted the importance of open communication and the need for vigilance in recognizing troubling behaviors in adolescence. It serves as a somber reminder of the potential for tragedy even in seemingly peaceful setting. Case 4. Natasha Ellis. In the quiet town of New Carlisle, Ohio, life unfolded with a gentle rhythm. The streets were lined with modest homes, and neighbors exchanged pleasantries during morning walks. Among the residents was Natasha Ellis, a 16-year-old girl known for her reserved demeanor. She was a friend of a 13-year-old girl, Janice, whose parents disapproved of their friendship. This disapproval planted seeds of resentment and a desire for revenge. On a fateful evening in May 2019, the tension between the two girls reached its breaking point. They devised a plan to eliminate Janice's parents. Ellis entered the home on North Church Street and, with a knife, fatally stabbed Lee A. Moore, Janice's mother, and injured 2 others. The attack was swift and brutal, leaving the community in shock. The authorities responded promptly. Ellis, wearing yellow rubber gloves, was found at the scene and immediately taken into custody. During questioning, she admitted to the crime, stating that she believed Janice's family was abusive and that this was the only solution. The case garnered significant media attention, highlighting the involvement of a teenager in such a heinous act. Ellis was indicted on charges of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and felonious assault. The prosecution presented a case that underscored the premeditated nature of the crime. The defense argued for leniency, citing Ellis's age and the influence of her friendship with Janice. The courtroom was filled with tension as both sides presented their arguments. In a landmark decision, Ellis was tried as an adult and pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder charges. She was sentenced to 22 years in prison. The community was divided. Some felt justice justice was served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh for a teenager. The case of Natasha Ellis raised profound questions about juvenile justice and the capacity of young individuals to commit grave offenses. It sparked debates about the influence of peer relationships and the responsibility of parents in monitoring their children's associations. The tragedy left an indelible mark on New Carlisle, serving as a somber reminder of how deeply personal grievances can escalate into irreversible actions. Case 5. Janine Gonzalez. In the suburban calm of Beaufort, Georgia, life proceeded without incident. Ashley Bocanegra, a 30-year-old mother, lived a modest life, balancing work and motherhood. Unbeknownst to her, her romantic involvement with Daniel Gonzalez, a man already in a relationship with Antonetta Stevens, would lead to a tragic confrontation. Daniel's sister, 17-year-old Janine Gonzalez, and Antonetta Stevens, 27, devised a plan to confront Ashley, luring her to an apartment complex under false pretenses. On August 11, 2022, Ashley arrived at the designated location believing she was meeting Daniel. Instead, she was ambushed by Antonetta and Janine. The two women physically assaulted Ashley, dragging her by the hair and delivering multiple blows. The attack was recorded on video, capturing the brutality of the assault. Ashley was left with severe injuries and later died in the hospital. Gwinnett County Police initiated an investigation, uncovering the love triangle involving Daniel, Antonetta, and Ashley. The motive for the attack was rooted in jealousy and betrayal. Antonetta and Janine were arrested and charged with aggravated battery, robbery, and felony murder. The case garnered significant media attention, highlighting the dangers of unresolved conflicts and the consequences of violent actions. During the trial, both Antonetta and Janine were found guilty of their respective charges. The prosecution presented evidence, including the recorded footage of the assault and testimonies detailing the events leading up to the crime. The defense argued for leniency, citing the emotional turmoil experienced by the defendants. However, the court emphasized the severity of the crime and the loss of life. Both women were sentenced to 20 years in prison. The court's decision to convict Antonetta and Janine was met with mixed reactions. Some believed the sentences were too lenient, while others felt they were appropriate given the circumstances. The community was left grappling with the senseless loss of a life and the impact of the crime on all involved. Ashley's family expressed their grief, while the defendants faced the consequences of their actions. The tragic death of Ashley Bocanegra serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and unresolved conflicts. It raises questions about the extent to which personal grievances can escalate into violence and the importance of addressing emotional issues constructively. The case underscores the need for open communication and conflict resolution to prevent such tragedies. As the community continues to heal, the legacy of Ashley's life and untimely death prompts reflection on the choices that lead to irreversible outcomes. Case 6. Trinity Shockley in Mooresville, Indiana, a quiet town where the rhythm of daily life is unbroken. Mooresville High School stands as a symbol of tradition and community. Among its students is Trinity Shockley, an 18-year-old senior known for her reserved demeanor. Outwardly, she appears as any other teenager, attending classes, engaging with friends, and navigating the complexities of adolescence. However, beneath this facade lies a mind grappling with deep-seated turmoil and a fascination with infamy. On February 13, 2025, authorities arrested Trinity Shockley for allegedly planning a mass shooting at Mooresville High School. The plot, dubbed Parkland Part 2, was intended to coincide with the 7th anniversary of the Parkland tragedy. Shockley reportedly admired Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooter, and had expressed intentions to emulate his actions. The plan was thwarted following a tip from the FBI's Sandy Hook Promise Say Something anonymous reporting system, which led to a search of Shockley's home and the discovery of disturbing materials. The investigation revealed that Shockley had been planning the attack for over a year. Authorities uncovered a collage of mass shooters, including Cruz and Dylan Roof, in her bedroom. Additionally, notebooks filled with violent imagery and messages were found. Shockley had also engaged in online conversations detailing her plans and expressing admiration for infamous shooters. Charged with conspiracy to commit murder and 2 counts of intimidation with the threat to commit terrorism, Shockley's trial became a focal point for discussions on mental health, gun violence, and the influence of social media. The prosecution presented evidence of her detailed plans and online communications, while the defense questioned the reliability of the evidence and the extent of her intent. The court proceedings concluded with Shockley being held without bond, pending further psychological evaluations. The community remained divided, with some viewing her as a misguided individual in need of help, while others saw her actions as a serious threat that could have resulted in tragedy. The case of Trinity Shockley serves as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding youth, mental health, and societal influences. It raises critical questions about the role of online communities in shaping behaviors and the importance of early intervention. While the immediate threat was averted, the underlying issues persist, urging society to reflect on how to address and prevent such incidents in the future. Case 1. Carly Gregg, Brandon, Mississippi. A quiet, suburban neighborhood where school day routines and family life unfold under a calm exterior. On March 19, 2024, that stillness shattered in the Smiley household, a place ordinary on the surface, but hiding deep tensions. Carly Madison Gregg was 14 years old at the time, a high school freshman at Northwest Ranking High, where her mother, Ashley Smiley, taught math. Carly appeared to be a typical teenager, top grades, involvement in activities, but beneath the facade, a troubled interior life. Carly's background was unremarkable externally, middle-class family, school, therapy, but in early 2024, family friends and psychiatrists would later describe her as suffering from depression, self-harm, auditory hallucinations, and substance use, including marijuana and vape pens her mother discovered. She had entered new psychiatric medication days before and reportedly faded into dissociative states. On March 19th, Carly returned home alone around mid-afternoon. Surveillance cameras captured her in the kitchen, walking calmly, hands behind her back, before 3 successive gunshots and a woman's scream echoed through the house. Ashley Smiley lay dead from gunshots to the face, caused by a .357 Magnum registered to the family. Carly returned to the kitchen, retrieved her mother's phone, texted her stepfather Heath to lure him home, and also messaged a friend, asking if they were squeamish around dead bodies, before showing them the corpse. When Heath arrived, Carly shot him in the shoulder. He wrestled the gun away and overpowered her. She fled through the backyard but was arrested shortly after nearby. Security footage showed an emotionally detached Carly, texting, letting her dogs in after her mother's death as chaos erupted when her stepfather returned. Heath described the moment of confrontation as a blur. A gun went off in my face. She was screaming out of her mind like she'd seen a demon. His testimony painted a relationship that had been good, with abrupt breakdowns in mental stability shortly before the shooting. Carly was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and evidence tampering. She rejected a 40-year plea deal and instead pleaded insanity. During the week-long trial in September 2024, jurors saw security video of her behavior before and after the shooting. The defense presented psychiatric testimony, including from Dr. Andrew Clark, who described dissociative episodes, hallucinations, and medication-induced numbness. Carly reportedly had no memory whatsoever of the incident. Prosecutors countered that she was fully aware of her actions, citing her calculated texts, invitation to a friend, and ambush plan for her stepfather. After approximately 4 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Carly Gregg guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, attempted murder, and tampering. On September 23, 2024, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 life sentences expected, one for murder and one for attempted murder. In court, she sobbed upon hearing the verdict. Prosecutors called her evil, while the defense vowed to appeal. Carly Gregg remains incarcerated with no possibility of parole, serving a life sentence in Mississippi's adult system. Her attorneys have since filed motions, first appealing in October 2024, and then in April 2025, requesting new trial documents and representation. In March 2025, her lead counsel changed to attorney James Murphy. The court has denied her request for a new trial, finding the additional evidence insufficient to alter the conviction. The crime was disturbing, not just in its violence, but in the eerie composure before and after. The trial forced a reckoning with mental illness, teen detachment, and legal responsibility. Case 2, Samantha Heath. In the tranquil town of Barnstead, New Hampshire, life progressed slowly. The community was close-knit, with neighbors familiar with one another and children playing happily in the streets. Among its residents were 19-year-old Samantha Heath and her boyfriend, 23-year-old Kyle Buffum. Their relationship, though marked by an age gap, was seemingly ordinary. Samantha, a high school graduate, was known for her friendly demeanor and had recently moved in with Kyle and his family. However, beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Kyle's controlling nature began to surface, and Samantha found herself drawn into a web of manipulation and coercion. On January 26, 2014, Samantha lured her close friend, 18-year-old Andrea Halverson, into Bear Brook State Park under the pretense of spending time together. Once isolated, Samantha attacked Andrea, stabbing her 16 times. The brutal assault was interrupted when a passing car approached, prompting Samantha to flee, leaving Andrea for dead. Miraculously, Andrea survived and was discovered by a passerby who alerted authorities. She was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent extensive treatment for her injuries. Investigators soon uncovered that the attack was not a spontaneous act, but a premeditated plan orchestrated by Kyle Buffum. Forensic analysis of Samantha's cell phone revealed over 70 pages of text messages between the couple detailing their intentions to murder Andrea and another individual named Luther, followed by a spree of robberies and a planned escape to Florida. Kyle had manipulated Samantha into believing that committing these acts would prove her loyalty and love for him. He had also previously been arrested for providing alcohol to minors at a house party, which led to a 30-day jail sentence served over several weekends. During these weekends, Samantha attended parties with her friend Andrea, leading to infidelity that further fueled Kyle's jealousy and desire for revenge. Samantha was arrested and charged with attempted first-degree murder. She agreed to testify against Kyle, revealing the extent of his manipulation and control over her actions. In March 2015, she pled guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. Kyle Buffum was arrested on February 1, 2014, and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, accomplice to attempted murder, and criminal solicitation. Initially pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, he later changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The events left the Barnstead community in disbelief. Andrea, though physically scarred, has shown remarkable resilience in her recovery. Samantha's actions, driven by manipulation and coercion, serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of toxic relationships and the importance of recognizing and addressing controlling behaviors. As of 2025, both Samantha and Kyle remain incarcerated, serving their respective sentences. This case highlights the critical need for awareness and intervention in situations where individuals may be under the influence of coercive control.
Case 3, Christie Stroud. On the evening of April 27, 2024, the Felling area of Gateshead, UK, was tranquil. Residents went about their routines, unaware that a violent act was about to shatter their community's peace. At approximately 9 p.m., Christie Stroud, then 15, along with Leandro Lopez and Jordan Tams, both 17, executed a planned attack on Gary Belfield, 40, and his son, Luke Williams, 21. Armed with a knife and a screwdriver, Lopez and Tams entered the Belfield residence, while Stroud waited outside. Inside, Lopez and Tams inflicted multiple stab wounds on both victims. Gary Belfield succumbed to his injuries due to a severed femoral artery, while Luke Williams managed to escape and received medical attention. The attack was reportedly triggered by a disagreement involving a dog, highlighting how a minor conflict can escalate into tragedy when influenced by underlying tensions and poor decision-making. Following the incident, law enforcement quickly apprehended the three individuals. Evidence indicated that Stroud had played a significant role in orchestrating the attack, despite not being physically present during the assault. In January 2025, at Newcastle Crown Court, Stroud, Lopez, and Tams were convicted of murder and attempted murder. The court acknowledged Stroud's age and background, but emphasized the severity of her involvement in the crime. Judge Constable sentenced Stroud to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years and 93 days before parole eligibility. This sentence reflects the court's recognition of her youth, yet underscores the gravity of her actions. As of August 2025, Christie Stroud remains incarcerated at a secure facility, serving her sentence. Her case serves as a poignant reminder of how youthful indiscretions can lead to irreversible consequences. Case 4. Nicole Jackson. In the early morning hours of November 26, 2022, East Point, Georgia, a quiet suburban community was rocked by a devastating tragedy. The East Point Fire Department responded to a blaze at an apartment complex where they discovered the lifeless body of a 4-year-old girl. Her twin sister was found alive but severely traumatized. The fire, initially believed to be accidental, was soon revealed to be part of a chilling cover-up. Nicole Ashley Jackson, a 27-year-old mother of twin daughters, was arrested after investigators uncovered the horrifying truth. Authorities determined that Jackson had intentionally killed one of her daughters and then set the apartment on fire in an attempt to conceal the crime. The surviving twin was left alone in the apartment, enduring unimaginable fear and confusion. Jackson's actions not only ended a young life, but also scarred her surviving child for years to come. Following her arrest, Jackson faced multiple charges, including murder, first-degree cruelty to children, and arson. The case drew widespread media attention, highlighting the deaths of maternal betrayal and the impact on the surviving twin. As of February 2025, a trial date had been set, but the legal proceedings were ongoing. The community remained in shock, grappling with the loss and the questions surrounding Jackson's motives. As of August 2025, Nicole Jackson remains incarcerated, awaiting trial in Fulton County, Georgia. The legal system continues to seek justice for the young victim and her surviving twin sister, whose lives were irrevocably altered by their mother's actions. The case serves as a stark reminder of the potential for darkness within even the most familiar faces. The tragedy in East Point underscores the vulnerability of children and the profound impact of parental actions on their lives. As the legal proceedings unfold, the community holds its breath, hoping for justice and grappling with the loss of innocence. Nicole Jackson's case remains a poignant example of how trust can be shattered in the most unexpected ways. Case 5. Emma Cusack. The Luxor Hotel and Casino, with its iconic pyramid and glowing beam, stands as a beacon on the Las Vegas Strip. On June 28, 2023, the hotel buzzed with the usual energy: tourists, neon lights, and the promise of unforgettable nights. Among the visitors was 36-year-old Charlie Satrustege from California, who had arranged to meet 17-year-old Emma Cusack, a teenager he had connected with on the dating app Bumble. Their 2-month online exchange culminated in this rendezvous, setting the stage for an unexpected tragedy. The evening began with casual conversation and shared drinks. According to Cusack's account, after consuming 8 shots of vodka, Satrustege revealed a handgun on the nightstand, mentioning his interest in hunting. They retired for the night around 1 a.m. However, Cusack later reported that Satra Stege woke her up around 3 a.m., complaining about her coughing. An argument ensued, and Cusack claimed she feared for her safety when he advanced toward her. In a panic, she grabbed the handgun and fired, fatally shooting Satra Stege in the head. She then stole his wallet, cell phones, keys, and his car before fleeing the scene. Hours after the incident, Cusack contacted the police, confessing to the shooting. She was arrested later that day. Initially charged with open murder, robbery, and grand theft of a motor vehicle, Cusack later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. In September 2024, she was sentenced to 11 to 27 years in prison and ordered to pay over $15,000 in restitution to Satra Stege's family. She will be eligible for parole in 2033. The unfortunate incidents at the Luxor Hotel illustrate the unpredictable dynamics of human connections, particularly those started on the internet. A random interaction blossomed into irreversible outcomes, emphasizing the intricacies of relationships and the risks that can be hidden within seemingly harmless meetings.
Case 6. Leslie Garcia Juarez. In the serene suburbs of Gwinnett County, Georgia, life unfolded like any other typical American neighborhood. Families enjoyed peaceful mornings, children played in parks, and the hum of daily routines filled the air. Among the residents was 16-year-old Leslie Garcia Juarez, a teenager whose life seemed ordinary. Living in Lilburn, Georgia, Leslie was known to her community as a quiet, unassuming young woman, blending seamlessly into the backdrop of suburban life. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered, and a tragic event would soon disrupt the tranquility of this community. On December 29, 2020, the calm of a Duluth apartment complex was shattered when 22-year-old Adolphe Mable was found with fatal gunshot wounds inside his residence on Satellite Boulevard. Despite immediate medical attention, Mable succumbed to his injuries. 2 days later, on December 31, 2020, Leslie Garcia Juarez was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and felony murder in connection with Mable's death. Investigators believed the incident to be domestic related, though specific details about the nature of their relationship were not publicly disclosed. As the investigation unfolded, authorities discovered that Leslie was already in custody at the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice's Regional Youth Detention Center in Gainesville, Georgia, facing charges for a separate murder. In March 2021, she was charged with felony murder and aggravated assault in connection with the 2019 death of 19-year-old Oseo Montano in Norcross, Georgia. The discovery of Leslie's involvement in 2 separate homicides within a year raised questions about her background and the factors leading to such tragic outcomes. Given Leslie's age at the time of the crimes, she was charged as an adult in both cases. The legal proceedings for each case were complex, involving considerations of juvenile justice and adult criminal law. Details about the trials, including court dates, defense strategies, and prosecutorial arguments, were closely followed by the community and legal observers. The dual charges highlighted systemic issues within the juvenile justice system and sparked debates about appropriate sentencing for minors involved in serious crimes. As of August 2025, Leslie Garcia Juarez remains incarcerated,
though specific details about her sentencing and current status are not publicly available. Her case continues to be a point of discussion regarding the treatment of minors in the adult criminal justice system and the long-term impacts of early life trauma and exposure to violence. What began as a seemingly ordinary life in a quiet suburb ended in tragedy, leaving behind a community grappling with the aftermath. The case underscores the importance of early intervention, mental health support, and community engagement in preventing such incidents. As the legal system continues to address Leslie's cases, the broader conversation about juvenile justice and its implications remains ever relevant.
Case 7, Megan Dakota Grunwald. On a quiet winter afternoon in Eagle Mountain, Utah, the serene landscape was shattered by an unthinkable act. 17-year-old Megan Dakota Grunwald, an ordinary teenager, found herself entwined in a deadly crime spree that would forever alter her life and the lives of others. Raised in Draper, Utah, Grunwald was known for her love of animals and a budding relationship with 27-year-old Jose Angel Garcia Jaregui. What began as a teenage romance spiraled into a tragic series of events on January 30, 2014. That afternoon, Grunwald and Garcia Jaregui were parked along Highway 73 when Utah County Sheriff's Sergeant Corey Ride stopped to assist them. As Sergeant Ride approached, Garcia Jaregui opened fire from the back window of their white Toyota Tundra, fatally wounding the officer. Grunwald sped away, leading a harrowing chase through 2 counties. During the pursuit, Garcia Jaregui shot and seriously injured Deputy Greg Sherwood. The pair carjacked another vehicle in Nephi, continuing their flight until a final confrontation with law enforcement led to Garcia Jaregui's death. Grunwald was apprehended and later charged with multiple felonies, including aggravated murder. Grunwald's defense portrayed her as a victim of coercion, claiming she was threatened by Garcia Jaregui and acted out of fear for her life. However, prosecutors argued that her actions indicated complicity, suggesting she was motivated by love and loyalty to Garcia Jaregui. Evidence presented during the trial included testimonies about their relationship and Grunwald's continued support for Garcia Jaregui even after his death. In April 2015, Grunwald was found guilty of 11 charges, including aggravated murder and attempted aggravated murder. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. However, in 2021, the Utah Supreme Court ruled that she had been improperly convicted due to jury instruction errors, leading to a new trial. In June 2021, Grunwald accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to 2 second-degree felony charges, manslaughter, and assault against a peace officer. Judge Darrell McDade sentenced her to a maximum of 30 years in prison, with sentences to run consecutively. At that time, she had already served approximately 7 years. As of 2025, Megan Grunwald remains incarcerated, serving her sentence for the role she played in the tragic events of January 30, 2014. Her case continues to be a subject of public interest, reflecting on the complexities of youthful decisions and the consequences that follow. The story of Megan Dakota Grunwald shows how a single day can irreversibly change lives.
lives, the importance of choices, the influence of relationships, and the enduring impact of actions taken in moments of fear and confusion.
Case 1. Maricela Diaz. On a cold, unforgiving night in rural Henson County, South Dakota, the life of 16-year-old Jaslyn Guerra was snuffed out in a brutal act of betrayal. It wasn't a random act of violence. No, this murder was the result of a twisted love affair, fueled by jealousy, manipulation, and a thirst for violence. Maricela Diaz, a 15-year-old girl, and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Alexander Salgado, were about to change everything for Jaslyn in the most horrific way imaginable. It all began in Indiana, years before the tragedy unfolded. Maricela Diaz was just 13 when she first met Alexander Salgado, a man much older and more experienced in the ways of the world. Their relationship wasn't a fairy tale, it was a nightmare. Salgado physically assaulted Diaz, pushing her into moments of darkness so deep she even attempted to take her own life. Despite intervention from Child Protective Services, Diaz couldn't escape the pull of Salgado's influence. She had a child with him, and in July 2009, the two of them fled to South Dakota, hoping for a fresh start. In South Dakota, they met Jaslyn Guerra, a bright, innocent 16-year-old girl. But instead of forming a friendship, Diaz became suspicious. She thought Jaslyn and Salgado were secretly having an affair. What happened next would be a series of events that would lead to a gruesome betrayal, a violent crime that no one could have predicted. On the fateful day, Diaz played the part of the friendly acquaintance, asking Jaslyn for a ride to Walmart under the guise of needing lighter fluid for a cookout or bonfire. Jaslyn, unsuspecting, agreed, but the plan wasn't a bonfire at all. It was a carefully calculated trap. They drove out to a remote, desolate area. There, Salgado and Diaz turned on Jaslyn with a brutality that was almost unimaginable. They stabbed her multiple times, her screams echoing through the cold night air. But they didn't stop there. They shoved her lifeless body into the trunk of her own car. The pair set the car on fire, but the worst part, Jaslyn was still alive when the flames began to consume her. The lighter fluid they had bought together was the very same that they used to ignite the inferno that would be the end of Jaslyn's young life. The autopsy later confirmed that Jaslyn didn't die from the stab wounds. It was the smoke inhalation that ultimately killed her. The fire that destroyed the car was reported by locals, and when authorities responded, they discovered the unimaginable. Jaslyn's body was found in the trunk, charred beyond recognition. It didn't take long for the police to arrest Diaz and Salgado. Alexander Salgado, already a convicted criminal, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life without parole. But Maricela Diaz's case was far from over. Diaz's trial would draw attention for its shocking details. Her defense claimed she was under Salgado's control, a pawn in his twisted game. She was young, they argued, and had suffered years of abuse. But the prosecution was relentless. They showed that Maricela Diaz wasn't an innocent bystander. She participated actively in the murder, driving the car, luring Jaslyn to her death, and even helping set the car on fire. In 2015, after a long and emotional trial, Diaz was convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping. The jury's decision was clear. This was
was no accident, no impulsive act of passion. It was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Maricela Diaz, just 15 years old at the time of the crime, was sentenced to 80 years in prison. The judge's words were a harsh reminder of her actions. You've taken an innocent life, and in doing so, you've forfeited yours in many ways. As of 2025, Diaz remains locked away in a South Dakota prison. The tragic events of that night haunting not just her, but an entire community. She'll be eligible for release in her 90s, her life, in many ways, already over. Maricela Diaz may have been young, but the coldness she displayed on that night was enough to steal the life of a promising young woman. There are no winners in this story, only broken lives and a brutal act of violence that will forever be remembered.
Case 2. Paris Mayo. On the evening of March 23, 2019, in the small town of Rossignol, Herefordshire, a chilling crime was unfolding behind the closed doors of a seemingly ordinary family home. 15-year-old Paris Mayo, alone in the living room, gave birth to a baby boy. Her parents and brother were upstairs, unaware of the nightmare unfolding below. The child, named Stanley, would soon become the victim of a crime so horrific it would shock the entire nation. Paris, a young girl studying childcare, had always been around children, but what no one knew was that she had been hiding a pregnancy she hadn't even realized she had. In court, she would claim she didn't know she was pregnant until just before the birth. But what led up to this tragic event was a dark story of a troubled home life, particularly with her father, Patrick Mayo. Paris testified that her father made her feel worthless. She described how, at just 13 years old, she started seeking intimate relationships as a way to gain acceptance, driven by deep self-loathing and a broken family. The night of the birth, Paris endured labor in silence. With no medical help, no family, and no one around to offer support, she delivered her baby boy without a sound. The court would later describe her quiet suffering, saying that she kept her pain hidden, afraid to wake her parents who slept upstairs. Her father, critically ill and undergoing dialysis, was being cared for by Paris's mother. No one knew she was in labor. What happened next would be incomprehensible. Shortly after delivering the baby, Paris turned on Stanley in a violent rage. The injuries to the newborn were so severe, they were compared to those sustained in high-speed car accidents. The exact nature of the assault remains unclear, but the judge suspected Paris may have crushed the baby in a fit of anger. Despite the brutality of the attack, Stanley fought for life, surviving for at least an hour. But Paris wasn't done. When the baby showed signs of life, she shoved cotton wool balls into his mouth, ultimately suffocating him. In the aftermath, she placed his tiny body into an item, then abandoned it on the doorstep of her family home. The next morning, Paris's mother discovered the lifeless baby and made a desperate, tear-filled 999 call to emergency services. The recording of that call, played during the trial, would bring the horrific crime to light, unraveling a twisted tale of neglect, violence, and secrecy. Within days, a police investigation was launched by West Mercia Police. Paris initially denied everything. She claimed she didn't know she was pregnant until the moment she gave birth, and that the baby's injuries were caused when he fell. She said she never sought help out of fear that her father, already in poor health, would be angry and disappointed. As the investigation continued, experts
experts were brought in to examine Paris's mental state. One of the prosecution's key witnesses, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Duncan Harding, would find himself under fire for his apparent bias after publicly stating Paris should be prosecuted early on in the investigation. But it was Paris's actions that would ultimately seal her fate. The trial, which lasted 5 weeks, offered jurors the option of convicting Paris for child murder, which would imply that she was mentally disturbed when the crime occurred. But in the end, the jury returned with a guilty verdict for murder. At her sentencing on June 26, 2023, Mr. Justice Garnham called the case sad and troubling, acknowledging that although Paris was young and frightened, she had made the conscious decision to end her baby's life. The judge pointed out that she knew she was pregnant and about to give birth, and yet she chose to kill her child. While the murder wasn't planned, it was a deliberate act in the moment, and the judge didn't hesitate to point out the aggravating factors: the extreme vulnerability of Stanley and the betrayal of trust between a mother and her child. Paris's defense described her as a vulnerable and overwhelmed individual who lacked proper support. But at 19 years old, Paris Mayo was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 12 years. She was sent to a young offender institution to serve her sentence. As of March 2025, Paris has served nearly 2 years of her life sentence. If released after the minimum term, she will be around 27 years old. And though the family's nightmare is far from over, this tragic story serves as a stark reminder of how a young girl's broken world can shatter a future in ways no one could ever imagine.
Case 3, Sienna Rose Pecor. On the evening of March 23, 2023, a reckless joyride turned into a devastating tragedy. 15-year-old Sienna Rose Pecor, with no license and no permission, slipped out of her house, took her mother's silver Toyota Corolla, and set off down Mason Street. Sitting beside her was 17-year-old Cruz Beltran, equally as unqualified to be in the driver's seat. The only thing they had in mind? Speed. Cameras along the route captured the horrifying truth. The Toyota, driven by a girl who had no idea what she was doing, wove dangerously through traffic at over 110 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. The reckless driving continued mindlessly until seconds before 6:30 p.m. when the traffic light at Mason and Oneida changed to yellow. Sienna, believing she could make it through the intersection, slammed her foot on the accelerator. But what she didn't see coming was a northbound SUV entering the intersection legally. The impact was catastrophic. Investigators later confirmed the crash occurred at a speed of around 116 to 123 miles per hour, shattering lives in the blink of an eye. Cruz Beltran, the young man who had trusted Sienna, was killed instantly, his body crushed by the sheer force. 2 people in the SUV survived, but they too would never be the same. As the police arrived at the scene, body cam footage recorded their chilling first interaction with Sienna. Dazed and confused, she was questioned about her reckless speed. Her response was chilling in its honesty. "I don't know why I was going that fast," she said. "I wasn't racing. I didn't think I was going over 100 miles per hour." A breathalyzer test came back negative for alcohol, but that wasn't the only shocking discovery. Sienna had no driver's license, and the car? It was her mother's, who believed it was still parked safely in their driveway. The crash scene was meticulously reconstructed using footage from nearby Walgreens
Walgreens and Shell gas stations. The chilling data didn't lie. The Corolla had traveled over 3 times the posted speed limit. Prosecutors would later emphasize the terrifying reality. The crash happened less than 2 miles from Sienna's home, and she reached that fatal speed in less than a minute. Because Wisconsin law treats homicide-related charges seriously for those 10 and older, Sienna was arrested and booked into Brown County Jail. The charges: first-degree reckless homicide, first-degree recklessly endangering safety, hit and run involving death, and taking a vehicle without consent. A judge ordered she be housed in an isolated juvenile block within the adult facility. In February 2024, after intense negotiations, Sienna pleaded guilty to second-degree reckless homicide and second-degree recklessly endangering safety. The remaining charges were dropped but read in for sentencing. At the hearing, Sienna's words were as simple as they were heartbreaking. "I accept responsibility." On April 12, 2024, the court delivered its sentence: 9 years behind bars. The judge, acknowledging Sienna's age and unstable home life, expressed that she had shown remorse for her actions. But Sienna, struggling to hold back tears, addressed the court. "I understand there are consequences for every action, and I will carry this forever," she said. "My intentions were never to hurt anyone. I am not the person this makes me out to be." The gallery was filled with Cruz Beltran's family. His 2 sisters, broken by grief, read heartfelt statements about the years of birthdays and holidays they would spend without their brother. But it was Cruz's mother, Michelle Sana, whose words cut through the courtroom. "I forgive you because we all make mistakes, but the hole in my heart will never close." As part of her sentencing, Sienna was required to complete a GED, hold full-time employment, perform 300 hours of community service, speak to high school students about the dangers of reckless driving, and pay restitution of $13,285.19. As of May 2025, Sienna has served just over 2 years of her 9-year sentence at Tachadita Correctional Institution. With 6 years and 10 months still remaining, she will begin 6 years of extended supervision once she is released. A life forever changed by a split-second decision.
Case 4. Erica Butts and Shanita Cunningham. In November 2009, a chilling discovery unfolded in Summerville, South Carolina. Inside a quiet home, emergency responders found a 3-year-old girl named Serenity Richardson lifeless on the floor. Her tiny body, battered with bruises from head to toe, showed signs of relentless abuse, deep contusions, internal injuries, and bruises covering her arms, legs, and back. Serenity was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. But the true horror wasn't just the brutality of the crime. It was who had committed it. These weren't strangers, but people entrusted with the care of the child. Her godmother, Erica Mae Butts, and her close friend and roommate, Shanita Latrice Cunningham. The women were supposed to protect Serenity, but in just a few days, they brutally beat her to death. Serenity, who lived in Detroit with her mother, Eaisha Richardson, had been sent to South Carolina while her mother was in the process of moving. What was supposed to be a brief stay with Butts, a woman Eaisha trusted deeply, ended in a nightmare that no one could have foreseen. The abuse began almost immediately upon Serenity's arrival. In just a few short days, Butts and Cunningham, angered
angered by the child's potty training accidents, relentlessly beat her. They used a belt and a plastic coat hanger, tools that were part of a terrifying and deadly punishment. By the time the final assault took place, Serenity's body had already endured unthinkable trauma. November 3rd would be the day paramedics were finally called, but it was too late. Serenity's injuries were horrific, internal and external trauma from repeated beatings. The autopsy painted a gruesome picture of the child's suffering, revealing blunt force trauma and deep bruising, which suggested a pattern of continuous violence. The investigators were shocked by the extent of the abuse. Serenity's injuries didn't reflect a single violent outburst. They were the result of a sustained and brutal cycle of violence. Bruises from earlier beatings were found beneath newer marks, evidence of escalating abuse. The coroner, horrified, described it as one of the most gruesome cases of child abuse he had ever witnessed. Both Butts and Cunningham were arrested, and the case turned even more disturbing when investigators uncovered that neither woman had tried to stop the other. There were no signs of hesitation, only a cruel, escalating pattern of abuse that ultimately took Serenity's life. Both women were charged with homicide by child abuse. In interviews, the women tried to shift blame, each offering conflicting stories. But their stories fell apart under the weight of the evidence. Both eventually confessed to the unspeakable crime. In 2011, Erica Mae Butts entered an Alford plea, which meant she didn't formally admit guilt, but acknowledged the evidence was enough for a likely conviction. Shanita Cunningham pled guilty. When the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, the courtroom erupted in disbelief. Both women collapsed in front of the judge, sobbing uncontrollably. They had taken a toddler's life, and now they were struggling to face their own punishment. But for some in the courtroom, their emotional collapse was nothing short of ironic. These were the women who had beat a defenseless child to death, ignored her cries for help, and never once sought medical attention. The judge's words were unflinching. He called their actions sadistic, emphasizing that Serenity's death was slow, agonizing, and entirely preventable. Serenity's mother, her heart shattered, took the stand to give a tearful statement about her daughter's innocence. She spoke of Serenity's sweetness, her smile, and the things she loved. She also spoke of the guilt she would carry for the rest of her life, for trusting these women with her precious child. The case sent shockwaves across the nation, not just because of the brutality, but because it exposed how often children endure suffering in silence. It was another grim reminder of how easily trust can be weaponized, and how sometimes those we trust most can become the very ones who harm us. There were no red flags. Serenity's mother had known Butts for years. They had grown up together in Detroit, and there was no history of violence. There were no criminal records, no hints of danger, just the quiet hope that Serenity would be safe, loved, and cared for. But instead, Serenity was brutally murdered, hundreds of miles from her mother, with no one to protect her in her final moments. Today, Butts and Cunningham remain behind bars, serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Their names will forever be tied to a case that left even seasoned investigators shaken. But the name that will endure is Serenity, a little girl who never had the chance to grow up, who never saw her first day of school, and whose second chance was stolen from her. Her name has become a symbol of vigilance in South Carolina's child protection community, a constant reminder that we must never let our guard down, even when the people we trust the most are in charge of our children's safety.
Case 5. Tyler Witt. In the upscale, quiet neighborhood of El Dorado Hills, California, a heinous crime shook the community to its core. On the night of June 11, 2009, a loving mother was brutally murdered in her own home by the very person who should have loved her most, her daughter. Tyler Witt, just 14 years old, and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Stephen Culver, would leave behind a twisted tale of obsession, manipulation, and a chilling desire to escape that led to an irreversible tragedy. Joanne Witt, an accomplished engineer for the California Department of Transportation, had always been a devoted mother to her only child. Tyler was artistic, intelligent, and lived a relatively comfortable life, nurtured under Joanne's loving but firm guidance. However, their bond would be shattered by a series of dark revelations that unfolded in the spring of 2009. It was then that Joanne discovered her daughter's involvement with Stephen Culver, a troubled 19-year-old with no clear direction in life. Stephen had initially presented himself as a house guest staying with the Witts while going through a difficult time, but he was secretly having an affair with the underage Tyler. Joanne, horrified by the discovery, confronted both of them, forbidding their relationship. When this didn't work, she contacted the authorities and reported Stephen for statutory rape, even going as far as providing Tyler's diary, which detailed their forbidden relationship. This would mark the beginning of Joanne's tragic fate. To Tyler and Stephen, Joanne had become an obstacle to their twisted love, a barrier they felt needed to be removed. The couple, now consumed with hatred toward Joanne, hatched a plan not only to escape, but to kill her and end their lives in a suicide pact. The plot was chilling in its calculated nature. On June 11, Tyler drugged her mother's drink with sleeping pills, and Joanne, unsuspecting, went to bed. In the dead of night, Stephen snuck into the house through an unlocked door, allegedly opened by Tyler herself, and entered Joanne's bedroom with a large kitchen knife. He attacked her with savage force, stabbing her over 20 times. The blood spattered across the bed and walls as Joanne fought for her life. Her hands were marked with scratches and bruises, evidence of her desperate attempts to fend off her attacker. But it was futile. Joanne succumbed to her injuries and died alone in her bed. In the aftermath, rather than acting out of fear or panic, Tyler and Stephen remained eerily calm. They turned down the thermostat to slow the decomposition of the body, switched off the lights, and left the house, taking money, clothes, a laptop, and a suicide note with them. The note, a bizarre declaration of love, detailed their plans to die together. They then traveled to San Francisco, using Joanne's credit card to check into a hotel where they spent the next few days watching movies, ordering food, and preparing to end their lives. Among the items found in their room were rat poison, sleeping pills, and a copy of Donnie Darko, a film about time travel and death. When their suicide attempt failed, the couple fled, trying to blend
blend in with the homeless community. Back home, Joanne's absence from work prompted a welfare check. Inside her home, police discovered her body, and suspicion quickly fell on Tyler. The investigation revealed a much darker story than anyone could have imagined. A manhunt ensued, and within days, Tyler and Stephen were located near San Francisco International Airport. They were arrested without resistance. During their interviews, both tried to shift the blame. Tyler claimed that Stephen was the sole perpetrator, while Stephen said he was manipulated by Tyler, who had threatened suicide if he didn't comply. But evidence, including journal entries and text messages, revealed a disturbing obsession from Tyler, who had repeatedly expressed her desire to see her mother dead. Faced with the weight of the evidence, Tyler agreed to a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a lesser sentence. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Stephen was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. In a letter to the court, Tyler expressed deep regret, writing, "I made the worst mistake of my life. My mom loved me, and I took her away. I will never forgive myself." Today, Tyler Witt remains in prison. Reports suggest she has shown an interest in studying psychology and has even begun mentoring younger inmates. Whether she will ever be granted parole remains uncertain. Joanne Witt is remembered by her family and friends as a loving and intelligent woman who gave her life to her daughter. And her murder has left a scar on the El Dorado Hills community. This tragic case serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked emotional manipulation, the destructive power of obsession, and a mother's ultimate sacrifice to protect her child.
Case 1, Brittany J. Dwyer. In August 2016, 19-year-old Brittany J. Dwyer from Adelaide, Australia, seemed like a typical rebellious teenager, covered in tattoos, piercings, and showing a defiant streak. However, beneath this exterior, there was something far darker. A cold-blooded killer willing to murder her 81-year-old grandfather, Robert Bob Whitwell, a retired war veteran, to claim his fortune. Bob lived alone in his modest home in the Craigmore suburb of Adelaide. A private and gentle man, Bob trusted Brittany despite her troubled past involving the law and drug issues. Little did he know she had been plotting his death for weeks. Brittany learned that Bob had over $230,000 in cash hidden at a safe at his home. But her motives weren't driven by a need for necessities. She wanted the money to fund a lavish lifestyle, including drugs, shopping, and a new car. She wasn't alone in her plans. Her accomplice, Bernadette Burns, played an active role, with the two exchanging text messages and voice memos detailing the crime. Brittany even sent a message saying, "I'm going to do it. I have to. I need the money." Weeks before the murder, Brittany and Bernadette drove 20 hours from Queensland to Adelaide with knives and a plan. But when they arrived, Bob welcomed them warmly with tea and showed Brittany family photos. She hesitated and left, unable to follow through. However, their plan wasn't over. On August 5th, Brittany returned to Bob's home alone. She told him she just wanted to visit, and after spending some time together, she followed him into the hallway.
There, she stabbed him 7 times in the neck and chest with a large knife. As Bob lay bleeding, he reportedly said, "I can't believe you did this." Brittany then attempted to open the safe but couldn't. Panicked, she cleaned the knife, changed her clothes, and left. She texted Bernadette, "It's done. He didn't deserve it." A few days later, Bob's body was discovered by a family member. There were no signs of forced entry or anything stolen. At first, investigators had no leads, but after reviewing CCTV footage, phone pings, and text messages between Brittany and Bernadette, the full extent of their plan was uncovered. They had even discussed how they would act at Bob's funeral to avoid suspicion. When confronted by the police, Brittany confessed, saying, "I didn't want to do it, but I needed the money." Her confession shocked the nation. A granddaughter had murdered the man who raised her over a safe she couldn't even open. In 2017, Brittany was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. Bernadette Burns received a 13-year sentence for her role in planning and encouraging the murder. As of 2024, Brittany, now in her late 20s, remains incarcerated at Adelaide Women's Prison. She has reportedly undergone therapy and expressed remorse during private interviews. Her eligibility for parole begins in 2036. What makes Brittany's case so chilling is the level of premeditation involved. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was a carefully calculated betrayal, planned over months with text messages and long drives across the country. Bob had welcomed his granddaughter into his home, trusting her, only to be murdered by the very person he loved most. Case 2. Jennifer Mee was just an ordinary teenager in St. Petersburg, Florida, until a peculiar condition took over her life: constant hiccups.
Hi, how are you? I'm good. I get really bad chest pain, abdominal pains, throat pains, back pains. It's unbelievable.
What started as a minor annoyance soon escalated into something far more baffling. Jennifer began hiccuping more than 50 times per minute, continuously for weeks. Doctors were unable to explain the cause, and her unusual condition quickly captured national media attention, featuring on NBC, Good Morning America, and The Today Show. She became known as the girl who couldn't stop hiccuping. Some doctors thought it could be Tourette's syndrome, while others speculated stress or even a nervous system malfunction. Regardless of the reason, Jennifer's case drew significant public interest. However, behind the media frenzy, Jennifer's personal life was unraveling. Her family was torn apart, and her relationship with her mother became strained. As she entered her late teens, she ran away from home multiple times, drifted between different households, and started associating with an older crowd. By the time she was 18, her hiccups disappeared, but a darker side of her emerged. Her social media presence took a disturbing turn, with cryptic updates, gang signs, and photos with people much older than her. Jennifer began dating Lamont Newton, a man over 10 years older than her, who was linked to petty crime. Jennifer's behavior and identity changed dramatically. The sweet, innocent girl once seen on morning TV was no longer recognizable. Things took a tragic turn one night when Shannon Griffin, a 22-year-old Walmart employee, responded to a Craigslist ad. The post was vague but promised sex, which prompted Griffin to drive to a nearby house around 10:30 p.m. Unbeknownst to him, he was walking into a trap. Inside, Jennifer, Lamont, and their friend Lauren Rafford were waiting. Jennifer lured Griffin in, flirted with him, and led him into an abandoned returned home. Moments later, Lamont and Lauren ambushed him. They pulled a gun, demanded money, and attempted to rob him. When Shannon resisted, a violent struggle ensued, culminating in 3 gunshots. Shannon Griffin collapsed in the dark, bleeding and dying. Within 24 hours, the police arrested Jennifer, Lamont, and Laren. The shock wasn't just the murder, it was who was involved. The media repeated the headline, "Hiccup Girl charged with murder." The girl who had captured the nation's attention with her bizarre medical condition was now accused of being the bait in a calculated murder plot. Legally, things got complicated. Although Jennifer didn't pull the trigger or fire the gun, Florida's felony murder rule held that anyone involved in a felony where a death occurs can be charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors didn't need to prove Jennifer killed Griffin. They only needed to show that she lured him to the scene, knowing a robbery was set to take place. And that's exactly what they proved. During her interrogation, Jennifer appeared confused, emotional, and at times distant. She initially denied any knowledge of the murder, but later confessed, saying, "I didn't know they were going to kill him, but I set everything up. I brought him there." This admission sealed her fate. Her defense team argued that Jennifer had a low IQ, poor mental health, and was easily manipulated, but the jury wasn't convinced. In 2013, Jennifer Mee was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Lamont and Laren also received life sentences. Jennifer's family was devastated by the verdict, but Jennifer remained emotionless, staring ahead quietly. The girl who once couldn't stop hiccuping had nothing left to say. She is currently serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. In interviews conducted from prison, Jennifer has claimed she was manipulated and didn't think anyone would get hurt. However, Shannon Griffin's family continues to mourn the loss of a young man who believed he was meeting a girl, but instead became a victim of a senseless crime. Despite petitions for an appeal, Jennifer's conviction remains unchanged. She remains locked up for life, and the story of her transformation from the girl who couldn't stop hiccuping to a convicted murderer serves as a chilling reminder of how drastically a life can change.
Case 3, Isabella Guzman. She gained widespread attention after a haunting viral video showed her sitting in court with an unsettling smirk, void of any remorse. While millions of people viewed the clip, the horrifying truth behind it remained unknown to most. Isabella wasn't simply a defiant teenager, she was a killer. What she did to her mother was so brutal and shocking that even seasoned investigators were left deeply disturbed. The events began one evening at 9:30 p.m. when neighbors heard a woman scream echoing from a suburban home, followed by a chilling silence. When police arrived, they found blood dripping from the ceiling. In the bathroom upstairs, the lifeless body of 47-year-old Yun Mi-hoi was discovered, stabbed 79 times. Her daughter, Isabella Guzman, had ended her life in a vicious attack. Leading up to that night, the tension in the Guzman household had been building for months. Isabella had always been difficult, angry, withdrawn, and rebellious, but recently her behavior had taken a violent turn. She fought with her stepfather and had made threats against her mother. Just days before the murder, Yun Mi-hoi had sought help from the police, telling them that Isabella had threatened her life, saying, "You will pay." The police issued a warning, but it wasn't enough. On August 28, 2013, Isabella waited for her mother to enter the bathroom. Without warning, she attacked.
Armed with a kitchen knife, she repeatedly stabbed her mother in the face, neck, and torso. Blood splattered across the walls, ceiling, mirror, and floor. Isabella didn't hesitate. Once the attack was finished, she calmly changed her clothes, left the house, and vanished. The following day, police found her hiding in a nearby garage, barefoot, eerily calm, and silent. When asked why she had committed the crime, she offered no explanation. It was as though her very soul had left her. During her trial, a chilling detail captivated the public: her unsettling smirk. The footage of her in court went viral. Who was this girl? Doctors testified that Isabella was not just angry, but was suffering from schizophrenia, hearing voices, and believing her mother was evil. In her deluded state, she thought she was saving the world by killing her. The court didn't see her as a cold-blooded killer. They recognized her as mentally ill. Isabella was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo. She has remained there since. In 2020, Isabella made headlines again with an interview in which she said, "I wasn't myself when I did that. I wasn't in my right mind." She expressed a desire for release, claiming she had improved, but the public remained unconvinced, haunted by the memory of her cold smile and the brutal act she committed 79 times. Despite the horror of her actions, Isabella became a controversial figure online, with some even romanticizing her story. A TikTok trend emerged, featuring fan edits and the hashtag #FreeIsabella. Yet behind the viral fame was a shattered family and a life ruined by untreated mental illness. Isabella Guzman was not a cold-blooded killer in the conventional sense. She was a ticking time bomb, and no one intervened in time. Her mother paid the ultimate price for that neglect.
Case 4, Mackenzie Shirilla. It began like many modern love stories, a teenage infatuation fueled by late-night texts, fast cars, and the rush of youth. But for Mackenzie Shirilla, it ended in what prosecutors would later describe as a deadly mission. At just 17, Mackenzie was the epitome of an all-American girl. Pretty, popular, a cheerleader from a quiet suburb in Strongsville, Ohio. But beneath her flawless Instagram photos and makeup lay something darker, something obsessive, possessive, and ultimately lethal. Her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, was 20, charming, street smart, and the kind of guy parents warned their daughters about. They partied, fought, and made up, but there was always an underlying threat. Mackenzie allegedly told Dominic, "If you ever leave me, I'll kill us both." Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but it wasn't long before it was too late. On July 31, 2022, at 5:30 a.m., a surveillance camera captured Mackenzie driving a car down Progress Drive at an alarming speed. Dominic sat in the passenger seat, and another friend, Davian Flanagan, just 19, sat in the back. The car never slowed, never swerved, and never tapped the brakes. It flew off the road and crashed headfirst into a warehouse. The aftermath was devastating. Dominic and Davian died instantly, while Mackenzie survived. When first responders found her, she was unconscious but alive. She claimed to remember nothing, but the car's onboard data told a different story. 100 miles per hour, no braking, gas pedal pressed to the floor. In court, prosecutors made it clear Mackenzie had turned her car
into a weapon. This wasn't an accident. It was a cold-blooded execution. The motive? A toxic, obsessive relationship that spiraled into violence. Mackenzie had fought with Dominic just before the crash, her jealousy and rage boiling over. In her fit of anger, she acted on her chilling promise. If I can't have you, no one can. In August 2023, Mackenzie was convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. At just 19, she became one of Ohio's youngest women ever sentenced for double homicide. The families of Dominic and Davian were left broken, their future stolen in an instant. Mackenzie's life, once filled with carefree moments, was now marked by prison jumpsuits and solitary confinement, a life destroyed by a single hateful act. Her case captured national attention, serving as a tragic reminder of how unchecked, unstable, and toxic teenage love can lead to unimaginable consequences.
Case 5. In January 2016, the small college town of Blacksburg, Virginia, home to Virginia Tech, was a place where students balanced their dreams and challenges. But behind the doors of an off-campus apartment, 19-year-old Natalie Keepers was plotting a horrifying crime. Though she wasn't a killer in the traditional sense, Natalie became an accomplice in one of the most chilling child murders in Virginia's history. The victim, 13-year-old Nicole Madison Lovell, had been through more in her brief life than most adults. A cancer survivor and liver transplant recipient, Nicole struggled with her self-esteem, was frequently bullied at school, and spent much of her time on social media trying to reinvent herself. It was through her online presence that she met 18-year-old Virginia Tech freshman David Eisenhower. Nicole thought she had found a boyfriend, but she was unknowingly being manipulated by him and his accomplice, Natalie, into a deadly plan. Natalie, an honors student studying aerospace engineering, came from a stable background with no criminal history. However, she harbored a fascination with morbidity, keeping journals filled with violent fantasies. When David confided in Natalie about Nicole potentially exposing their secret, instead of recoiling, Natalie became infatuated with him. Together, they devised a plan to kill Nicole. David lured her out of her home under the pretense of meeting him and stabbed her in the woods. The murder was cold and calculated. Afterward, he and Natalie disposed of her body, driving across state lines to North Carolina. They scrubbed the car, destroyed Nicole's phone, and went back to their daily lives as if nothing had happened. Nicole's family reported her missing, and a massive search began. Within 72 hours, digital evidence pointed directly to David. He was arrested, and soon after, Natalie's involvement was revealed. She initially denied any involvement, but as investigators pressed further, she admitted everything and even led them to Nicole's body. During David's trial in 2018, he tried to shift the blame to Natalie, claiming she was the mastermind. However, the evidence, including messages, plans, and Natalie's testimony, made it clear that he was lying. David was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and concealing a body, receiving a 50-year sentence. Natalie, charged with accessory to murder and conspiracy, tried to claim she was manipulated by David and that she was mentally ill. However, her own words revealed her true involvement. She wanted to experience it. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Nicole Lovell was just 13 years old. She had fought cancer, loved pandas, and dreamed of a bright future. But that future was stolen by two disturbed individuals. David Eisenhower will serve his sentence until he's in his 60s, and Natalie Keepers
keepers will spend decades in prison with the possibility of parole when she's in her 50s. Nicole's family continues to mourn, advocating for online safety and raising awareness about the dangers of grooming and peer accomplice violence.
Case 6. Michelle Carter. In a quiet town, a young man was discovered dead in his truck behind a Kmart. At first, it seemed like a suicide, but as the investigation continued, it became clear that the situation was much more complex. It was a tragic end, but it also revealed a legal nightmare involving manipulation, digital coercion, and fatal influence. At the center of it all was Michelle Carter, a 17-year-old girl with blonde hair, braces, and a phone full of disturbing messages that were anything but innocent. Conrad Roy III, an 18-year-old, was a quiet, intelligent, athletic, and hard-working young man who had struggled with anxiety and depression for years. He had previously attempted suicide, keeping a journal where he expressed his inner turmoil. Despite being described by those around him as sensitive, bright, and capable, Conrad struggled with feelings of low self-worth. He met Michelle in 2012 while visiting relatives in Florida, and their relationship largely existed through text messages and phone calls. Over time, their bond grew, but so did the darkness. Michelle Carter, living in Plainville, Massachusetts, was a high-achieving student, sweet and well-liked. However, she suffered from an eating disorder, took medication for depression, and often felt invisible. Behind her phone screen, though, she was a different person. She craved attention and meaning, and she began to associate these needs with Conrad's death. Conrad confided in Michelle about his suicidal thoughts, sharing various methods he considered, such as carbon monoxide poisoning, overdoses, and hanging. At first, Michelle tried to talk him out of it, but soon something changed. She began to encourage him, pushing him to go through with it. She told him, "You keep putting it off, but you never do it. You just have to do it. You just have to do it. All you have to do is turn on the generator." When Conrad hesitated and stepped out of the truck, Michelle allegedly urged him to get back in, and he did. Tragically, he died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Over a year later, the text messages were uncovered, sparking public outrage. Michelle was arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter. The case wasn't simple. There was no weapon, no physical presence, only words, texts, and phone calls. Could words alone be enough for a conviction? Michelle's defense argued that Conrad had struggled with suicidal thoughts long before he met Michelle and had attempted suicide multiple times. They also cited Michelle's own mental health struggles. However, the prosecution painted a different picture, one of a girl who wanted to be seen as the grieving girlfriend, gaining sympathy and popularity. After Conrad's death, Michelle texted her friends admitting, "His death is my fault. I could have stopped him." She waived her right to a jury trial, and in June 2017, the judge found her guilty of involuntary manslaughter, stating that her act of encouraging him to return to the truck ultimately caused his death. Michelle was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, with 15 months to be served behind bars and the remainder suspended with probation. She began her sentence in February
February 2019 and was released early in January 2020 for good behavior. The case raised critical questions. Can someone be held criminally responsible for encouraging suicide through text messages? Where does free speech end and criminal behavior begin? How do mental health, medication, and teenage psychology factor into these situations? Some viewed Michelle as a manipulative killer, while others saw her as a troubled teenager who made an irreversible mistake. Regardless, the case set a legal precedent and forced society to confront the deadly power words can hold in the digital age.
Case 7, Scarlett Jenkinson. In February 2023, in Warrington, Cheshire, two 15-year-olds, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, formed a disturbing bond that quickly escalated into something far more sinister. The two met at school and bonded over shared dark interests, leading them into an unhealthy obsession with violence and death. Before long, their friendship evolved from casual talks about murder to detailed planning. Their intended victim was Brianna Gay, a 16-year-old transgender girl from Birdwood. Brianna, who was known on TikTok for her beauty tips and glimpses of her life, was also a high school student dealing with bullying. She considered Scarlett and Eddie to be friends and trusted them enough to meet them on a cold afternoon in February at Victoria Park, unaware of the horrific fate awaiting her. Unlike most teens, Scarlett was deeply immersed in dark corners of the internet, watching serial killer documentaries, violent videos, and participating in forums that glorified murder. She kept a list of potential victims, detailing methods and fantasies. Eddie, quieter but equally disturbed, was drawn into Scarlett's violent ideas. He wasn't just following her, he actively participated in the planning. Together, they discussed murder methods, the best weapons, secluded locations, and ways to lure a victim. On February 11th, 2023, they lured Brianna to Victoria Park. CCTV footage captured the three of them entering the park, with Brianna appearing calm and smiling. The knife, which was concealed, came out once they were deep in the woods, away from any potential witnesses. There, Scarlett and Eddie launched their attack. Brianna was stabbed 28 times in her head, neck, chest, and back in a brutal, calculated assault. Once she collapsed, they left her in the mud and walked away. Later that day, dog walkers discovered Brianna's body and alerted the police. Detectives quickly connected Scarlett and Eddie to the crime, with phone records revealing disturbing messages between the two discussing their plans. Scarlett's room contained chilling notes and drawings, including a kill list with Brianna's name. Both teens were arrested shortly after. At their 2023 trial in Manchester Crown Court, prosecutors presented evidence including explicit messages, drawings, and statements from Scarlett, who expressed a desire to become infamous as a killer. Eddie, claiming he only went along with the plan out of fear of Scarlett, tried to portray himself as a victim of manipulation. However, the jury convicted both of murder in January 2024. In February 2024, Judge Amanda Yip sentenced them to life imprisonment. Scarlett received a minimum of 22 years before parole could be considered, while Eddie was given 20
20 years. The judge described their crime as premeditated, callous, and senseless. Experts noted Scarlett's manipulative and intelligent nature with a chilling obsession with serial killers, while Eddie, though more passive, was still capable of violence when influenced by Scarlett. By 2025, Scarlett, now 17, was held in a secure youth detention center under psychological monitoring, while Eddie was incarcerated in a separate facility. Both will spend the majority of their lives in prison before being considered for release. Case 8, Skylar Richardson, an 18-year-old high school senior from Carlisle, Ohio, had planned a summer filled with prom, college plans, and cheerleading camps. However, everything changed one morning in July 2017 when police discovered a devastating secret. In the backyard of her home, they found a newborn baby girl buried in a shallow grave. The baby's body was wrapped in a towel. To the outside world, Skylar appeared to be the quintessential all-American teen. Blonde, petite, and an honor student, known for being polite and well-liked. But beneath this image, Skylar was hiding a secret that no one, not even her closest friends, knew. In April 2017, during a routine appointment with her gynecologist, Skylar found out she was pregnant. At 32 weeks, she was deep into her third trimester. Skylar was devastated and begged the doctor to keep it confidential, fearing the reaction from her conservative family. She left the appointment without telling anyone, including her parents or boyfriend. On May 7, just a few days after attending her senior prom, Skylar gave birth to the baby alone in her bathroom. She later claimed that the baby was stillborn, not moving or crying. Shocked and panicked, Skylar buried the baby behind her home with a garden spade, without seeking medical help or calling emergency services. The truth remained concealed until 2 months later when Skylar returned to her doctor for a follow-up. There, she disclosed part of the story, prompting the doctor to report the matter to the authorities. During questioning, Skylar initially maintained that the baby was stillborn. However, after hours of intense interrogation, she changed her statement, mentioning that she had attempted to cremate the baby. This revelation caused a media uproar. The prosecution accused her of intentionally killing her baby to maintain her perfect life, while the defense argued that she was a scared, isolated teenager who panicked after giving birth alone. The trial, which began in September 2019, became a complex moral dilemma. The prosecution portrayed Skylar as a cold, image-obsessed teenager willing to kill her child to protect her outward appearance. The defense, on the other hand, presented her as a distressed teen suffering from an eating disorder without any support who made a tragic and panicked decision. The prosecution used photos of Skylar smiling at prom as evidence, claiming that they proved her motive to preserve her perfect image. The defense contended that the photos were misleading and didn't reflect the emotional state she was in. Forensic evidence also played a crucial role in the trial. A coroner initially suggested that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which fueled the prosecution's argument of intentional harm. However, during the trial, the same coroner admitted that the evidence wasn't conclusive, and there was no proof the baby had been born alive. This uncertainty became a key factor in the jury's decision. In the end, Skylar was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. She was convicted only of abuse of a corpse for burying the baby without informing authorities. The court sentenced her to 3 years of probation. The case sparked widespread debates about mental health, teen pregnancy, and the pressures of maintaining an ideal image. Some saw Skylar as a victim of trauma, a young girl overwhelmed by mental health issues, while others viewed her as manipulative and unreceptive. Many could not forgive the fact that she hid her pregnancy, gave birth alone, and never sought help either before or after the birth. Skylar completed her probation in 2022 and has since kept a low profile. She has expressed an interest in pursuing a career in law and helping others with mental health struggles. In rare interviews, Skylar has maintained that she did not intentionally harm her baby and that she suffers every day from what happened. This case brought national attention to issues such as teen pregnancy, stigma, the effects of isolation, and the complexities of legal proceedings involving minors. The key question remains: was Skylar a remorseless killer, or was she a terrified girl who made an irreparable mistake in silence?
Case 9, Jasmia and Tasmiyah Whitehead. Jasmia and Tasmiyah Whitehead were twin sisters who, at first glance, seemed to have a typical family dynamic. However, behind the walls of their home, chaos and tension simmered. Their mother, Nikki Whitehead, had been a teenage mother, giving birth to the twins at just 18 years old. For a large part of their early childhood, the twins were raised by their great-grandmother, Della Frazier. When the girls reached their teenage years, Nikki fought to regain custody, which she successfully obtained in 2007, with the court granting joint custody between her and Della. But reuniting with their mother wasn't easy for the twins. They viewed Nikki as a stranger, not a mother, and resented her attempts to impose rules. Nikki, on the other hand, struggled with controlling the twins, who yearned for more freedom. This led to numerous violent confrontations, so severe that the police were called to their home multiple times. On one occasion, Tasmiyah hit Nikki in the face with a pot, and during another argument, Jasmia punched a hole in the wall. The twins even found themselves in juvenile court and were placed in a diversion program. Court records showed that Nikki feared for her life, and others had witnessed the mounting tension. On January 13th, 2010, the situation finally erupted. The twins had missed their bus and gotten into another heated argument with Nikki. What started as a shouting match quickly escalated into shoving, then punching, and ultimately became a full-blown assault. The girls later admitted that the fight felt like it lasted forever. They used whatever they could find, a vase, a pot, and even a knife during the attack. Nikki fought back desperately, biting and scratching, but she was overpowered. The twins brutally beat her, stabbed her, and dragged her body into the bathtub. The house was soaked with blood. Nikki died from multiple stab wounds to her neck and chest, with deep cuts indicating rage and close contact. After the murder, the twins cleaned up, hid their bloody clothes, and went to school. Later, they returned home, staged the scene, and pretended to discover their mother's body. From the start, the police were suspicious. There was no forced entry, nothing was stolen, and the scene appeared to have been staged. Still, the twins maintained their story for over a year.
They were placed with relatives after the murder, and life continued as normal until May 2010, when DNA evidence linked the twins to the crime scene. Blood spatter was found on their shoes, and Nikki's blood was found under their fingernails. Cuts on their bodies matched the weapons used in the attack. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the twins confessed to the murder, describing in chilling detail the 40-minute fight that ultimately led to their mother's death. They explained that the assault wasn't quick, it was overkill. One detective later commented that they didn't just kill her, they slaughtered her. In 2014, both sisters pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and were sentenced to 30 years in prison each. By taking the plea deal, they avoided a murder trial and the possibility of life sentences. At just 16 years old, the twins were sentenced to spend the rest of their youth in prison. They are currently serving their time in separate Georgia prisons, with eligibility for parole in the 2030s. The white-haired twins have occasionally participated in prison interviews, expressing regret and confusion about how their relationship with their mother spiraled out of control. One of them stated in a recorded message, "It wasn't supposed to go like that." The case of Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead serves as a stark reminder of the deep-seated issues in family dynamics, unaddressed trauma, and the dangerous potential of teenage rage. It has prompted difficult questions about how much pressure teenagers can bear before reaching a breaking point, whether violence can be predicted when warning signs are ignored, and most disturbingly, whether two children could truly murder the person who gave them life.
Case 1. Skylar Neese. On the evening of July 5, 2012, 16-year-old Skylar Neese quietly slipped out of her bedroom window in Star City, West Virginia. Her parents, thinking she was asleep, never suspected she was walking into a trap set by the two girls she trusted most, her best friends. The next morning, when Skylar's parents realized she was missing, panic quickly set in. At first, they feared a typical runaway situation. There were no signs of a break-in, no struggle. But as hours turned into days and days into weeks, the theory that Skylar had run away began to unravel. Her bank account remained untouched, her social media accounts were silent, and she hadn't taken her phone charger or extra clothes. She was gone without a trace. Skylar's parents, Mary and Dave Neese, didn't give up. They worked tirelessly with police, printed flyers, made public appeals, but for months there was no sign of Skylar until an unexpected confession flipped the case upside down. Skylar's best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shea, had been inseparable with her since middle school. But as they entered high school, things began to change. Sheila was the bold, charismatic one, Rachel was quieter but eager to please, and Skylar was smart, witty, and increasingly uncomfortable with the changes in her friends. Then came the betrayal. In January 2013, 6 months after Skylar's disappearance, Rachel Shea walked into a police station and confessed. She and Sheila had lured Skylar out that night under the pretense of just hanging out. But instead of driving around, they took her to a remote wooded area near the Pennsylvania border. There, as Skylar began to walk away, the girls attacked her with kitchen knives, stabbing her more than 50 times. Skylar fought back, screamed, and ran, but she didn't stand a chance. After the brutal attack, they sat by, watching as she bled out. When it was over, they dragged her body into the brush, covered it with dirt, and left her there. Rachel's chilling explanation? We didn't like her anymore. That was their motive. Apathy. No jealousy, no anger, just indifference. A month later, Skylar's body was found buried in a shallow grave.
Her parents, who had held on to hope for so long, were devastated by the truth, which was far more horrific than they had ever imagined. Sheila, who had pretended to grieve, was arrested in May 2013. Her social media posts, which had shown fake sorrow, became a grotesque act of deception, while she knew exactly what had happened. In court, neither girl showed remorse. Rachel pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Sheila was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Both were teenagers, and their cruelty shocked the nation. Skylar's case became a landmark in legal history. It led to the passing of Skylar's Law in West Virginia, which mandates immediate public notification when the child goes missing, even if the case doesn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. The case also shattered the myth of teenage innocence. Skylar's diary revealed how she had sensed the betrayal coming, with one heart-wrenching entry reading, "You're doing all this expletive to me, and I'm not doing anything to you. You're a two-faced blank, and I'm done." She knew something was wrong, but never could have imagined the extent of her friend's betrayal. Today, Skylar's parents honor her memory, not for how she died, but for who she was. A kind-hearted young woman who trusted the wrong people. Sheila and Rachel's names are forever tied to the crime, but it's the void they left in the lives of everyone who loved Skylar that lingers the most.
Case 2. Lisa Bork. In the peaceful village of Karisel, Denmark, the idea of violence or radical extremism seemed like something from distant headlines, not something that could unfold in a quiet middle-class home. But on October 8, 2014, that illusion was shattered with the brutal murder of Tina Romer Holdegard by her own 15-year-old daughter, Lisa Bork. Lisa appeared to be a typical Danish teenager, blonde, bright-eyed, and raised in a stable middle-class home. However, beneath the surface, Lisa was struggling. Her parents had divorced and she frequently clashed with her mother. Over time, Lisa withdrew from both her family and school, a typical case of teenage rebellion that spiraled into something darker. It started online. Lisa became obsessed with violent Islamist propaganda, especially ISIS execution videos. She watched them repeatedly, often dozens of times in a row, and began glorifying the acts depicted. As she delved deeper into the content, she started chatting with radicalized individuals, one of whom was Bakhtiar Muhammad Abdullah, an older Iraqi immigrant with extremist views. The two developed a relationship, and Lisa, seeking purpose and power, became more deeply immersed in Bakhtiar's ideology. Lisa fantasized about joining ISIS and running away with Bakhtiar to Syria, but her mother, Tina, grew concerned. She noticed Lisa's erratic behavior, her obsession with violent videos, and her relationship with Bakhtiar. Tina attempted to intervene, setting boundaries, but Lisa resisted. She wanted her mother gone. On the night of October 8th, Lisa and Bakhtiar put their plan into action. They waited until Lisa's twin sister left the house, and then while Tina slept, they crept into her room with a kitchen knife. The attack was brutal. Tina was stabbed at least 20 times, and the violence was so extreme that investigators initially suspected multiple attackers. Lisa delivered the first blows, but Bakhtiar joined in, ensuring Tina's death. Afterward, Lisa called the police, claiming to have found her mother covered in blood. However, her story did not add up. Her voice lacked emotion, and she appeared oddly detached. When police arrived, they found Lisa sitting on her bed watching an ISIS beheading video. A review of her computer confirmed her fixation on extremist content, including videos titled ISIS Execution and Jihadist Beheadings. Text revealed that she had long planned her mother's murder and her escape with Bakhtiar. In court,
Lisa showed little remorse. She smirked on her testimony and offered vague, deflective answers. Some described her as cold, others as brainwashed. But the brutality of her crime and the ideology behind it left them in shock. Lisa was sentenced to 9 years in prison, spending the first year in juvenile detention before moving to a high-security adult prison. Bakhtiar received 13 years and was ordered to be deported after serving his sentence. The case made headlines across Europe and sparked critical questions about how a 15-year-old girl could become radicalized in a quiet Scandinavian town. Experts pointing to a combination of factors: broken family, emotional instability, online grooming, and the seductive simplicity of extremist narratives that offered a sense of purpose to a lost teenager. What made this case even more chilling was Lisa's preparation. She didn't just act impulsively. She studied how to kill. She consumed violent propaganda and let it shape her worldview. After the murder, she recounted watching the same videos that had inspired her to kill. Since then, Lisa has faded from the public eye, but her story remains a stark reminder. Radicalization doesn't require a battlefield, just access to the internet, a vulnerable mind, and an audience willing to stare at dangerous ideologies. In today's interconnected world, the threats that once seemed distant are now just one click away.
Case 3. Anissa Y. and Morgan Geyser. On May 31st, 2014, in the quiet town of Waukesha, Wisconsin, a seemingly innocent sleepover between three 12-year-old girls turned into a nightmare. Anissa Y. and Morgan Geyser, close friends of Peyton Leutner, had known each other for years. But beneath the surface of their friendship was a deadly plan that would shock the community and captivate the nation. After spending the night playing games and watching movies, the girls decided to go for a walk in the nearby woods. What seemed like a harmless childhood adventure quickly took a darker turn. In a secluded spot, Anissa and Morgan turned on Peyton. Morgan pulled out a knife and began stabbing Peyton, while Anya encouraged the attack. Peyton was stabbed 19 times, with wounds narrowly missing major arteries and one even grazing her heart. The motive behind this brutal attack was chilling. The girls believed they were trying to please Slender Man, a fictional internet character created in 2009 for a scary story contest on the website Something Awful. Slender Man, a faceless, elongated figure in a black suit, quickly became part of internet folklore, often depicted as stalking or abducting children. To Anissa and Morgan, Slender Man wasn't just a story. They believed he was real. They thought by killing someone, they could prove their loyalty to him and become his proxies, even fantasizing about living with him in a mansion deep in the forest. After the attack, Anissa and Morgan left Peyton bleeding in the woods. Miraculously, despite her severe injuries, Peyton managed to crawl to a nearby path where a passing bicyclist spotted her and called for help. Peyton survived the attack, but the psychological trauma would stay with her for life. Police apprehended the girls a few hours later, wandering near the interstate. During their interviews, both girls exhibited an eerie calmness, particularly Morgan, who admitted that she had been thinking about killing for some time. As more details emerged, the case took a darker turn. Morgan was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia, a rare but serious mental illness, which doctors believe played a role in her delusions. The legal system was faced with a difficult
difficult question of how do you prosecute two 12-year-old girls for attempted murder inspired by a meme. After intense legal battles, both girls were charged as adults. In 2017, Anya Moy pled guilty to being a party to attempted second-degree homicide and was sentenced to 25 years in a mental health facility. Morgan Geyser, who pled guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide, was sentenced to 40 years in a mental health institution. The case raised serious questions about the influence of internet culture on young minds, the complexities of childhood mental illness, and how the justice system should respond to young offenders who commit violent acts. This tragedy highlighted how deeply internet subcultures and mental health issues can affect vulnerable minds, especially children struggling to differentiate between fantasy and reality. Today, Peyton Leutner continues to recover, her strength and survival a testament to her resilience. Anissa and Morgan, meanwhile, live in institutional settings, forever marked by their belief in a fictional monster that led them down a dark, violent path. This case remains a haunting reminder of how the lines between fantasy and reality can blur, sometimes with tragic consequences.
Case 4. Aaron Caffey. In the early hours of March 1, 2008, the small town of Alba, Texas, was shaken by a brutal crime that exposed the darkest depths of teenage rebellion, forbidden love, and the length one girl would go for the boy she believed she couldn't live without. 16-year-old Aaron Caffey lived with her parents, Terry and Penny Caffey, and her two younger brothers, Matthew, 13, and Tyler, 8. The Caffey family appeared to live a quiet, devout Christian life and were well respected in their community. Aaron, the eldest, was bright, talented, and considered the model daughter. But behind the closed doors of the family home, Aaron was growing increasingly rebellious, especially after she began dating 19-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. Aaron's parents disapproved of the relationship, viewing Charlie as a bad influence. They tried grounding Aaron, taking away her phone, and doing everything they could to sever communication between the two. But Aaron was obsessed with Charlie, seeing him not just as a boyfriend, but as a savior from what she viewed as an oppressive home life. The more her parents tried to intervene, the deeper Aaron fell into the relationship. Then, in the dead of night, a horrific plan came to fruition. Charlie, along with his friend Charles Wade, arrived at the Caffey home armed with guns and a sword. Aaron stayed in the getaway car as the two young men entered the house and unleashed violence. Penny Caffey was shot and stabbed to death, and her two younger sons, Matthew and Tyler, were brutally murdered in their beds. The attackers then set the house on fire, intending to destroy all evidence. However, they did not anticipate Terry Caffey. Shot 5 times and left for dead, Terry somehow survived. Bleeding and in shock, he crawled out of the burning house and stumbled through the woods to a neighbor's home where he raised the alarm. As investigators examined the remains of the home, they quickly uncovered a chilling truth. Evidence, including phone records, text messages, and confessions, revealed that Aaron had not just known about the murders, she had planned them. Her motive? She believed that killing her family was the only way to be with Charlie forever. It was a twisted version of a Romeo and Juliet fantasy, a dream that ended in real blood.
When Terry learned that his own daughter had orchestrated the massacre, he was devastated. In interviews, his heartbreak was evident, yet he chose to forgive Aaron. His faith compelled him to show mercy, even in the face of such unimaginable loss. Aaron was charged with 3 counts of capital murder, pleaded guilty, and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 25 years. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade both received life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case shocked the nation, leaving everyone to wonder, how could a teenager become so consumed by love that she would destroy everything and everyone she had ever known? Was it manipulation, naivete, or something far darker? Even years later, the Aaron Caffey case remains one of the most haunting examples of teenage obsession gone horribly wrong. It's a story of love turned lethal, of innocence consumed by darkness, and a chilling reminder that beneath even the most picturesque homes, unimaginable horrors can sometimes lurk.
Case 5. Ashley Martinson. In the quiet town of Pyle, Wisconsin, 17-year-old Ashley Martinson's life took a tragic and horrifying turn on March 7, 2015. The day after her 17th birthday, Ashley killed her stepfather, Thomas Ayers, and then stabbed her mother, Jennifer Ayers, over 30 times. This brutal act was a result of years of abuse, neglect, and a life filled with trauma. Ashley's family appeared to be a typical household, but beneath the surface, her stepfather was a convicted felon known for violent and controlling behavior. He would monitor Ashley's movements, follow her to school, and even restrict her access to basic necessities, including food and phone privileges. Ashley's mother, Jennifer, either could not or would not protect her from this abuse. In an attempt to escape, Ashley turned to writing horror stories online under the pen name Vampchick. Her stories, filled with violence and revenge, reflected her inner turmoil. When Ashley began a relationship with a 22-year-old man, her parents intervened, taking away her car and phone. Tensions escalated, and on the morning of the murders, Ashley witnessed her stepfather physically assaulting her mother. Feeling trapped and desperate, Ashley grabbed a shotgun from her stepfather's collection and shot him in the neck and head. When her mother came to check on the situation, Ashley stabbed her repeatedly until she was dead. After the murders, Ashley fled with her boyfriend. They were later apprehended in Indiana after a nationwide manhunt. Ashley confessed to the crime, claiming it was an act of survival rather than murder. The state, however, charged her with 2 counts of second-degree intentional homicide. Ashley pled guilty and was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Her case has raised important questions about the impact of abuse, mental health, and the legal system's response to minors who commit violent acts. Ashley's story is a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of living in an abusive environment and the severe toll it can take on a young person's mental health. Today, Ashley is incarcerated at the Tachita Correctional Institution in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Her case remains a poignant example of how unchecked trauma and the failure to protect vulnerable individuals can lead to unimaginable outcomes.
Case 1. Rachel Wade. In the summer of 2009, the sun-drenched streets of Pinellas Park, Florida, seemed serene, lined with palm trees and bathed in warmth. Yet, beneath the bright skies, a teenage love triangle was spiraling into a tragic tale of obsession, betrayal, and eventually, murder. At the heart of this story was Rachel Wade, a 19-year-old waitress who was fiercely emotional and deeply infatuated.
Recently, she had broken up with her boyfriend, Josh Camacho, an 18-year-old known for his smooth talk and tendency to juggle multiple relationships. Despite the breakup, Rachel wasn't ready to let go, and neither was Sarah Ludman, an 18-year-old high school senior who was also vying for Josh's affection. Both girls believed they were the one for Josh. However, Josh played both sides, feeding the fire with mixed signals, empty promises, and whispered lies. The drama played out online, through texts, voicemails, and late-night confrontations, escalating quickly from virtual taunts to real-life violence. Rachel and Sarah didn't know each other well, but they hated each other, fueling the animosity through increasingly venomous messages. One of Rachel's disturbing threats to Sarah read, "I'm going to stab you and your Mexican boyfriend and his mother too. I'm going to kill you." What seemed like a trivial teenage feud soon took a horrifying turn on April 14, 2009. Rachel was in a friend's car when she spotted Sarah driving by with a companion, seemingly heading to confront her about Josh. Fueled by anger and adrenaline, Rachel jumped out of the car and hid in the shadows. When Sarah arrived, a brief exchange of insults quickly escalated into violence. Witnesses later testified that it happened in the blink of an eye. Rachel lunged forward with a steak knife, stabbing Sarah in the chest. The wound was fatal. The knife pierced Sarah's heart, and she staggered back to her car. She collapsed in the passenger seat, but despite being rushed to the hospital, she died before she could be saved. Rachel, sobbing, claimed self-defense, insisting that Sarah had attacked her first. However, the evidence, including the digital trail left behind by Rachel, painted a far different picture. The voicemails, the threats, the jealousy, everything pointed to premeditation. Prosecutors argued that Rachel had been waiting for this moment, planning it, and hoping it would happen. The jury believed them. Rachel Wade was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison. Sarah's family, devastated by the loss of their daughter, watched in disbelief as the young woman who had taken her life was led away in handcuffs. This case wasn't about hardened criminals or troubled childhoods. It was about two suburban teenagers caught in the toxic whirlwind of jealousy, love, and unchecked emotion. A deadly mix of ego, manipulation, and youth spiraling out of control. Josh Camacho, meanwhile, moved on with his life, reportedly fathering children with several women. His name would forever be linked to a murder he didn't commit, but one he certainly helped ignite. Rachel Wade's story quickly became a cautionary tale, featured in documentaries and true crime specials. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of social media, toxic relationships, and impulsive rage. This case illustrates how a simple teenage feud, fueled by misunderstandings, petty arguments, and obsession, can tragically escalate, leading to devastating consequences. What makes this case so chilling is its relatability. A love triangle, petty arguments, and a series of escalating words led to one fatal mistake. It reminds us all that words hold power, emotions can become weapons, and in the heat of obsession, a single moment can alter the course of a life forever. Case 2, Alyssa Bustamante. On the afternoon of October 21st, 2009, in the small rural town of St. Martins, Missouri, a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth Olton went missing while walking home from a friend's house. The quiet, close-knit community immediately sprang into action, mobilizing search parties to find Elizabeth. Her family and neighbors were alarmed. She was not the type to wander off. Shy, sweet, and especially close to her mother, Elizabeth's disappearance seemed out of character, and everyone feared the worst. As authorities initiated their investigation, what they didn't know was that Elizabeth was already dead. The person responsible for this heinous act was a 15-year-old girl living just down the road, Alyssa Bustamante. Alyssa, at first glance, appeared to be an ordinary suburban teenager. She lived with her grandparents and younger siblings, and she attended church regularly. Known for her rebellious streak, Alyssa had jet-blackened hair, heavy eyeliner, and a fascination with death. But none of these outward characteristics could have prepared anyone for the dark turn her life would soon take. When Elizabeth went missing, Alyssa initially helped with the search efforts. She comforted her siblings and appeared genuinely concerned. However, as the investigation unfolded, authorities began to notice troubling signs. One crucial clue emerged. Elizabeth's phone had pinged a tower near Alyssa's home. A trail through the woods behind Alyssa's home, muddy and well-worn, led investigators to a shocking discovery: a freshly disturbed patch of dirt. Underneath the soil, they found Elizabeth's lifeless body buried in a shell grave. She had been brutally strangled, stabbed, and her wrist slashed with a knife. The sheer brutality of the murder shocked even veteran investigators. Yet what was most chilling was the lack of a clear motive. Alyssa eventually confessed to the crime. During her interrogation, she admitted to luring Elizabeth into the woods under the pretense of hanging out, only to attack her without warning. There was no personal feud, no jealousy, and no argument. Alyssa killed Elizabeth simply because she wanted to know what it felt like to take someone's life. A search of Alyssa's diary revealed the horrifying truth. In an entry written the night of the murder, Alyssa detailed the event with unnerving closeness and even a sense of excitement. She wrote, "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the 'oh my god, I can't do this' feeling, it's pretty enjoyable." The confession and the killing journal entry left no room for doubt. The public reaction to Alyssa's crime was one of sheer disbelief and disgust. A 15-year-old girl had murdered a 9-year-old without remorse, without reason, and without conscience. Alyssa's defense team argued that she was suffering from severe depression and had attempted suicide multiple times before. They also highlighted her troubled upbringing, with a drug-addicted mother and an incarcerated father. But the court saw something far more disturbing: a young girl capable of methodical cruelty. Further investigation revealed that Alyssa had dug 2 graves days before Elizabeth's murder, suggesting that she had premeditated the crime and might have killed again. As a result, Alyssa was charged with first-degree murder and tried as an adult. In January 2012, Alyssa pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She was sentenced to her life in prison with the possibility of parole. The Olden family was devastated, not only by the loss of their daughter, but by the senseless nature of the crime. Elizabeth's tragic death had come at the hands of someone she trusted, someone who lived nearby, someone who smiled and waved, but secretly harbored a darkness no one could have predicted.
The case of Alyssa Bustamante is remembered as one of the most chilling examples of juvenile homicide in American history. It forced the nation to grapple with a disturbing question. Can a child truly be evil? What happens when a young mind, still developing, becomes twisted beyond recognition? Even today, the name Alyssa Bustamante evokes a haunting reminder that beneath the surface of some teenage lives, beneath the journals, selfies, and school books, something much darker may be lurking. It's a chilling reality that can go unnoticed until it's far too late.
Case 3. Eliza Wozni. It was just past 3 a.m. on a quiet night in Lincolnwood, Illinois, a time when the world feels still, safe. Grant Nelson, a 34-year-old Uber driver, was doing what he did most nights, driving passengers home and supporting himself. He picked up a young girl from a Walmart, a quiet, thin 16-year-old. It was supposed to be just another ride, a simple drop-off. Instead, it would become his last. Eliza Wozni didn't speak much that night. Surveillance footage shows her entering the 24-hour Walmart wearing a hoodie, glancing around as she walked past the cashier. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. In her hand, she carried a stolen machete and a knife. She walked out of the store, called for an Uber, and waited for Grant to arrive. Minutes into the ride, without warning, Eliza pulled out the blade and started stabbing and slashing. Grant screamed for help, desperately trying to fight back. He managed to pull over, stumbling out of the car, bleeding and barely alive. Neighbors heard his screams. One immediately called 911. "You have to hurry," he gasped. "I'm going to die." And he did. Eliza didn't run far. She fled the scene on foot, leaving the blood-soaked car behind, still clutching the weapons. She broke into a nearby office building and hid behind a desk, covering herself with her hoodie. When police found her, she still had the machete in her possession and Grant's blood on her clothes. She didn't speak, didn't cry, and didn't offer an explanation. She was simply blank, emotionless. Eliza Wozni was a 16-year-old high school student with no criminal history, no known mental health issues, and no apparent motive. There was no dispute, no robbery, and no fight, just senseless violence. A judge later called it one of the most brutal crimes he had ever encountered. The most chilling part, Eliza never explained why. No remorse, no emotion, just silence. Prosecutors charged her as an adult, as Grant's family demanded in court. Throughout the proceedings, Eliza remained impassive, showing no visible emotion, no apology, and no breakdown. She was sentenced to 27 years in prison and shall be eligible for parole in 2044. Grant Nelson was a brother, a son, a man who died trying to help someone in need. Unfortunately, the person in his car didn't want help, only blood. Some murders are planned, some are driven by hate, jealousy, or revenge, but this was chaos. Eliza Wozny's senseless attack was a reminder of how violence can emerge from nowhere, leaving everyone stunned, unable to comprehend the motive or the reason. Eliza was sentenced to 27 years in prison and shall be eligible for parole in 2044.
Case 4, Jasmine Richardson. It was a quiet Sunday in April when police arrived at the Richardson home in Medicine Hat, Alberta, only to find a scene that would haunt them forever.
Inside, they discover the bodies of a mother, father, and young son, all brutally stabbed to death. At first, it appeared to be a home invasion gone wrong. However, one thing didn't make sense. The daughter, 12-year-old Jaslyn, was missing. What they didn't yet know was that Jaslyn wasn't a victim in this crime. She was the mastermind behind it. Jaslyn Richardson seemed like an ordinary middle schooler at first glance, an honor student with friends and a bright future. However, behind that seemingly innocent facade, something darker was brewing. Jaslyn had fallen in love, but not with a boy her own age. Her obsession was with someone much older, Jeremy Stinky, a 23-year-old self-proclaimed werewolf. He drank blood, wore a vial around his neck, and believed that he and Jaslyn were destined to be together, even if that meant eliminating anyone who stood in their way. The two met online in vampire-themed forums and goth chat rooms. Jaslyn told him she was 15, though she was actually only 12. Jeremy didn't care. To him, she was his Juliet, and he was his Romeo. Jaslyn's parents were horrified when they discovered the relationship. They tried everything to break it off, taking away her computer and forbidding her from seeing Jeremy. But this only fueled the obsession. In a series of emails, Jaslyn expressed her plan. It begins with me killing him and ends with me living with you. Jeremy responded with chilling enthusiasm. Their throats I want to slit. They will regret the expletive they have done. No one saw it coming, but the deadly plan had already begun to take shape. That night, Jeremy snuck into the Richardson home. He first attacked his mother's father, stabbing him 12 times. Then he brutally murdered her father in the hallway. Jaslyn's brother Jacob hid behind a bed, crying and begging for his life. But Jaslyn did nothing to stop the carnage. Instead, she joined in, helping Jeremy murder her entire family. The following morning, a friend found the bodies. Police initially believed Jaslyn had been kidnapped, but by the next day, the truth emerged. Jaslyn was found with Jeremy, laughing and kissing and covered in blood. They had been at a truck stop buying food, as if nothing had happened. The trial that followed shocked the nation. A 12-year-old girl had helped kill her entire family for love and a dark fantasy. Under Canadian law, Jaslyn could not be tried as an adult. She received the maximum sentence, 10 years in total, with 6 years in custody and 4 years under community supervision. Jeremy was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Jaslyn Richardson was released in 2016 after serving her sentence under a new identity. She became one of the youngest people ever convicted of multiple murders in Canada, and one of the few to be fully released. Jaslyn claims she has reformed and regrets her actions, but there remains one lingering question. What happens when innocence falls in love with evil and chooses it? Jeremy Stinky, on the other hand, legally changed his name to Jackson A and remains in prison to this day.
Case 5. Miranda Barber. In the cold, bleak chill of a November night in Pennsylvania, under the false warmth of flickering streetlights, a man waited, unknowingly, innocently, for a woman he had just met through Craigslist. His name was Troy LaFrara, a 42-year-old man from Port Trevorton who had answered a personal ad offering companionship. What he didn't know was that this meeting would be his last. Troy was about to meet Miranda Barber, a 19-year-old woman who seemed pretty, articulate, and sweet. But Miranda wasn't alone. Hidden in the backseat of her car was her husband, Elite Barber, 22, who had been married to her for just 3 weeks. What should have been the start of their new life together had become something far darker. For Miranda and Elite, killing was their way of bonding. The couple met Troy in a parking lot in Sunbury, Pennsylvania on November 11, 2013. Troy got into Miranda's car believing he was meeting a woman for a paid romantic encounter. But little did he know he had just become the target of a twisted plan. This wasn't a crime of rage or desperation. It was premeditated, driven by a shared craving for violence. As Troy settled into the car, Elite waited quietly in the back seat, masked and ready. At Miranda's signal, Elite wrapped a cord around Troy's neck and pulled with all his might, while Miranda repeatedly stabbed him over 20 times. After the brutal killing, they disposed of Troy's body in an alley behind a residential area. Then the couple carried on with their night as though nothing had happened. They had dinner, watched a movie, and celebrated the thrill of their kill as if it were an anniversary. The next day, police discovered Troy's body. What followed was a chilling investigation, fueled by surveillance footage, cell phone records, and Miranda's own conflicting statements, which eventually unraveled the couple's story. The pair were arrested soon after. What emerged during their interrogations and in the courtroom horrified even the most experienced detectives. Miranda claimed that she had been part of a satanic cult since she was 13, and that she had killed at least 22 people across multiple states. She insisted that Troy was simply one more victim in a long series of murders. Though she later recanted some of these claims, the damage had already been done. The media quickly latched on to the image of the Craigslist killer couple, sparking public fascination. Were they devil worshippers, serial killers in the making, or just two young people seeking infamy? Elite's confessions sealed their fate. He admitted that the murder had been premeditated and that they had discussed the plan for weeks. They chose Troy as their victim because he had no family who would miss him. They were wrong. Troy's family mourned his death, fighting back against the narrative that he was simply a lonely man caught in a bad deal. In 2015, Miranda Barber pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Elite also pleaded guilty and received the same sentence. The couple is now serving time in separate Pennsylvania state prisons. To this day, Miranda's claims of a killing spree across multiple states remain unverified. Investigators in other states have looked into her accusations, but no additional murders have been definitively linked to her. Was she telling the truth? Was she lying for attention? Or were there other victims whose stories may never be told? What remains indisputable, however, is the story of Troy LaFrara, a man who was simply seeking human connection, but met with unimaginable cruelty. At the center of it were two young people whose love story was forged not in passion or loyalty, but in blood and deception. The case of Elite and Miranda Barber is more than just a murder story. It serves as a chilling cautionary tale about the dangers of fantasy untethered by morality and the terrifying reality that, in the digital age, evil can find you with just one wrong click.
In my honest opinion, I agree with the court's decision in this case. Of course, all details remain alleged unless proven in court. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned. More cases are coming soon.